Hello class and welcome to chapter 7 lecture. In this lecture we're going to be talking about pre-employment interviewing. So let's get started. Interviewing is the process of sitting down and meeting with the potential applicant for a job and asking them key questions to understand their fit for the company and also for the position upon which they're applying for. It's used to gather valid information about candidates, and a key focus for recruiters is to make sure they minimize getting the wrong information, and that you maximize getting the right information. So to this point, having the right criterion, the right questions to ask, understanding the right predictors for job success and performance are very, very important. You can have two different types of interviews. You have what's called screening interviews, which are interviews that are done generally pretty quickly, and they're done definitely by the HR. And they're kind of just designed to weed people out of the process. So you're asking them a set of standard questions, and depending on their answers, they're either kind of opted into the process to go further, or they're screened out or eliminated out. Another type of interview that people engage in is what's called an in-depth interview. This is when you're asking much more deep or much more intrusive questions about a person's abilities, their knowledge and their skills, and really trying to determine, are they a good fit for the job, the team, the company, the culture, etc., etc. To that extent, there are 4 common different types of structured interview styles or approaches. One is your your biographical approach. The second is a behavioral interview. Third is a competency interview, and then the last is a situational interview. And these all differ in a number of ways, right? So your biographical interview is an interview that's primarily based off a person's resume. Kind of what have you done, where have you been, and you're asking information that is very structured and that you can tend to verify and validate pretty easily. Behavioral interview is asking questions designed to predict what a person's behavior would be, particularly in certain situations. But you really want to understand how they behave, how they handle things that they do. You're trying to evaluate their behavior. Competency interviews are designed to determine a person's level of knowledge, or say competency, their grasp or hold on certain information, certain procedures, certain components that the job may require a person to deliver on. And you want to make sure that they have the right knowledge, skills, and abilities to deliver on those components. So you ask some questions about their competency in those areas. And the last is situational interviews. Situational interviews are designed to create certain situations, and you ask a person what would they do or how they handle a particular type of situation. When we look at this chart here, you can see that we're evaluating the different types of interviews against the degree of structure and the validity for making decisions. You can see all the styles that we mentioned earlier. In addition, you see stress and non-directive. We're going to cover that on the slide that's coming up. Right here, we're talking about the degree of structure. What we mean by structure is the formality of the interview. Are they asking the same questions of every person? Are we able to compare the answers and results of each interview equally across all individuals who did the interviews? So you can see that some interviews, such as biographical behavior, do better when it comes to structure than stress or non-directive interviews. Now, validity for making general selection decisions, more is a good thing. We want to be able to make very valid decisions. So biographical and behavioral interviews do a better job of delivering on validity than non-directive stress interviews. And you can kind of see from more to less and take a look at this chart to see which interview structure outperforms other interview structures. Now, let's talk about the benefits of having structured interviews. When I say structured interviews, once again, I'm talking about asking essentially the same questions to every person in the same way, the same style. One of the great things about this is that you could have more than one interviewer, and if they're all following the same interviewing rubric, you'll get consistent answers that you can compare even across different interviewers. So obtain consistent information needed for your decisions. This is one of the benefits of structured interviews. They tend to be more reliable than other formats of interviews, and particularly that of either stress or unstructured interviews, or because you may have different questions being asked of each person, and it's difficult to compare them. And different questions are the same question could be asked in different ways, which could affect the validity of the questions. Also, these are the easiest type of interviews to prove that you have met EEO guidelines and that you're not discriminating against people based on some protected class. Non-directive interviews. These are interviews where we may ask a question, and depending on that person's answer, that's what informs your next question. So you think of it like a daisy chain that's really flexible. So you start off at point A, but man, the end of the interview, you could end up talking about any topic that may be related or unrelated to the person's job qualifications. So it's very likely that you won't get all the information you need in order to assess the individual accurately and objectively in terms of their qualifications for the job. Additionally, with non-directive interviews, each interview is going to be different. Each person interviewed is going to give a different answer, and your non-directive interview style will then ask a question based on that answer. So each interview is going to end in a totally different place. Stress interviews are designed to put extreme stress and pressure on the applicant. So you may create a situation where they have to either answer questions fastly, or there's time limits, or they're under pressure because they're interviewing with a large group or panel of people. Either way it goes, you're trying to create stressful and anxiety situations to see how that candidate handles it. A panel interview is an interview where you have one applicant interviewing, but they're interviewing with multiple people. This could be kind of stressful, so it does qualify as a stress interview as well. But and basically the challenge here is that you're getting questions from, it could be 5 or 6 or more people, and they're all asking you questions. You're expected to answer them and kind of be able to keep pace with everything that's going on. So it's very challenging, very difficult style of interview, and quite intimidating. A team interview is an interview where people are interviewed where you're being interviewed by the people you would actually work with. And this is a great idea. It's a very common practice in corporate America. And the idea here is that the team members are not going to make the final decision on who's hired or who's not hired. The hiring manager generally does seek their feedback and input, but this is more about team fit and personality fit with the team. How well does the team think that they'll be able to work with the person or persons coming into their department? It's very important that when you're doing interviews that you understand what makes an effective interview. The whole point of conducting an interview is to gather information. To that extent, you don't want to ask yes or no questions. If you ask yes or no questions and you get the answer yes or no, you have no additional supporting context for the person to be able to answer. So ask questions which require an explanation for an answer. You want to avoid obvious questions. Avoid questions that just rarely produce a true answer. So, have you ever lied before? What is the person going to say? Yes, I'm a liar. In the interview, no, they're probably going to lie right then. So avoid asking questions that are so biased, so leading, so likely to produce false answers. A leading question would be, so how important do you think leadership is in this job? All right, so you've already told me the answer is leadership is important. Now they're going to answer in relation to what they just saw, all right, or to what you just said. Don't ask illegal questions, and stay away from questions that are not job related. And what we mean by illegal, I prefer to call them improper questions. Things about someone's marital status or their children or their ethnicity, things that could lead to a potential violation of a person's protected class. I'm not going to go through everything on this slide. I recommend that you take time to pause it, but these are categories, 5 categories of commonly asked questions, from general questions to problem-solving questions, motivational questions, and integrity-based questions. There are some problems with interviews, and you want to be aware of these so you know how to avoid them. But one, interviewers, it's important that they avoid making snap judgments. A lot of times research shows that we make decisions or assessments about people within the first 30 seconds of us meeting them. When it comes to interviewing, though, you really want to fight that urge to make snap judgments about a person. You want to avoid emphasizing negative things. So let's say somebody comes into an interview and you can see there's a stain on their suit. So, you're emphasizing to yourself, if they didn't have enough respect for the interview to come in with a clean suit, then why should I consider them for this job? Avoid focusing on unnecessarily negative things that have no effect on the job. You don't know why that statement was there. It could be there for any number of reasons. The halo effect refers to, is also the opposite of that's called the horn effect. So you can call it the halo/horn effect. Is where you may pick one particular attribute about a person and use that to make positive attributions about the person overall. So you may say, wow, this person used to run track and they were a great track star. Therefore, they must be good at everything else. So because of the discipline required to be a successful track star, and then you take that one attribute and you assume that they're carrying that same discipline over in other areas of their lives, for example. Or it could be a horn effect. You say, hey, this person plays in a rock and roll band, and therefore, since you don't like rock and roll bands, you attribute all the negative attributes of rock and roll bands to this person and their ability to perform on the job. So halo and horn effect, they're two sides of the same coin. It's something that you want to avoid in interviews. Biases and stereotypes, once again, you want to avoid them, particularly if they're related to a protected class. And then cultural noise. An example of cultural noise would be, let's say you're interviewing someone from another country and they have an accent. So you have to work a little harder to understand what that person is saying. As a result, that's cultural noise, and sometimes people allow that to influence their decisions as to whether a person is a good fit for a job or not. These are things that you want to avoid at all means. That wraps up our lecture for today. If you have any questions, be sure to shoot me an email or drop me a message. Thank you very much. Take care and have a good day.